What would it be like to put words in the mouths of a group as diverse as Homer Simpson, Miss Piggy, the COO of Facebook, and the President of the United States? Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick, and that's just what Nell Scovell has done. From one of the most classic episodes of The Simpsons, to her creation of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, to her co-authoring of the must-read book Lean In with the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, and some of the most memorable comic moments by President Obama, Nell's pen and sharp wit were behind them all. Now in her memoir, Just the Funny Parts, she delivers invaluable insights into the creative process, along with tricks for navigating a difficult work environment. Nell, myself, the crew, my son, my family, all have been a fan of at least some of the writings that you've done. In fact, probably all of the writings. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
I've read about 1,000 books doing the show, and almost every book starts with a famous quote and then goes on. But your book starts with your own motto, and I want to read that out loud. That which doesn't kill me allows me to regroup and retaliate. That is, and through your book and your career, you're not lying about that. I mean, you've really regrouped so many times. I don't know about the retaliation, but you did get what you wanted.
Well, Hillary Clinton's book, which came out a few months earlier, started with the actual quote, "That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger," and that kind of made me laugh because I thought, well, it's such a cliche, but I do hope I spun it, which is sort of what I've tried to do, not just with my writing, but with my life. You know, you take the cliche and you spin it.
Well, that's the premise, in fact, of being a great, especially when you were doing comedy, but even then later on, like on NCIS, you learned that it's that twist. Yeah. It's always that little twist, that unexpected twist.
Well, that's where the comedy comes from, and it's that shift in perception where, Santa Monica is such a beautiful place, this would be a good place to die, and just like, oh, wait, I thought we were talking about, the sunny Santa Monica. And I do think that shift is where comedy lives.
You make an observation where you say, the more you let people talk about themselves, the more they like you.
Don't you think that's true?
I hope so, and yet I have to be careful because I do a lot of the talking here. So, yeah, but isn't that, it's not only true, it is true and important in business of all types.
Well, I did hope that this book, while it's about pop culture, does extend to other fields, and a lot of people have written me and said, I'm in tech, or I'm a teacher, and I've learned things from your book.
Well, I was talking to my son just about, you want to become a great director? Read Nell's book, because just your conversations with author Penn.
I know.
And I mean, the advice, and again, you take that same advice, apply it to, like you just said, tech, apply it to banking, apply it to medicine, apply it to anything. Great advice works on all levels.
Well, Arthur was very special to me. I met him in the mid-'80s. I was working at Rolling Stone magazine. I was a journalist before I became a TV writer. And I was assigned to do a story on Penn and Teller Get Killed, which is a little-known Arthur Penn movie. And we had this great conversation that we just kept going for 30 years.
I want to read your line. In Hollywood, you rise up fighting or you go down fighting. Either way, you're fighting. And that is the constant battle. Now, I know in here especially, you talk about the specific issues that women faced, especially, and in fact, like we talked in the green room, we said, different times it seemed like they already broke through and then it would slump down and then break through, and it still is a big issue. But it's also, every man faces it as well. It's one of the rare businesses that may discriminate, but everyone's fighting, everyone's miserable, and yet you do it because you cannot help but do it.
Well, first, to go to breaking that glass ceiling, you know, I believe it's not actually made out of glass. It's made out of that Terminator metal that you break through, and then it, you know, reforms and maybe even gets a little harder for the next person. And it is hard for everyone, and everyone's hustling in Hollywood, and very few people get respect. I would say no one, but I think there are a couple people, because you need a couple of people to get respect for others to think that they could get it too.
Well, you even associate it to gambling to some extent, because
yeah.
that's what it's that kind of high. You get that high, but you're really rolling the dice.
Yeah, it's a lottery ticket.
And here's the key that makes it so painful. Eventually, you say, I cracked the code. If something seems like good news, it's probably a lie.
Yes. Yeah, no, how many times have I heard, you know, they loved it, and then it followed by, and they pass. So, you know, one of the things I talk about is you really learn not to get too high with the good news, and that helps you from having to get too low with the bad news. I mean, if you like disappointment, Hollywood is a great place for you.
You, in fact, you gave a lecture, I think, to students once, and you said something on that line. I forgot exactly what it was, but it's about that, isn't it? It's like if you have to be somewhat of a masochist. Let's just be honest.
Well, the quote I think you might be referencing was, I told a bunch of high school students not to follow their dreams.
Oh, that's right. Follow their
talents. Well, because, you know, I went into college pre-med and that didn't quite work out. And what I was really good at was writing. So that's, but look, you know, all advice is autobiographical. So for me, it was really about recognizing not what my parents wanted me to do or, you know, what other people I admired had done, but finding this way. Because I grew up on the East Coast. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a TV writer.
Well, speaking of which, when you give the 4 chapters of, actually the 5 chapters, 4 real stages of life, but there's a 5th one thrown in, and we're going to get to them, is the first stage is, who is Nell Scovell? And you first have to prove in some way or another, and it's sort of one of the ultimate catch-22s, because if you don't have the credit, they don't want you there, and you've got to figure out a way to get the credit before you get the credit. So it's really the first thing that every person in Hollywood who's breaking in at any level has to answer. And you say, and I thought this was great, when you said, who is Nell Scovell? You actually took that personal as well, to make a discovery about.
Well, at the end,
you know, at the end, right? It goes full circle, because at the end they go, we need a, wait, what is it?
Well, let's do this. So the 4 stages of a writer's career are, who is Nell Scovell? Get me Nell Scovell. Get me a younger, cheaper Nell Scovell. And who is Nell Scovell? So you do, and you know, you're supposed to cycle back into obscurity. And for me, it became this sort of call to arms of that existential question: who am I? What do I stand for? Am I going to speak out about my experiences? And specifically as a woman in the comedy business and what I had witnessed.
But when you answer that last, who is Nell Scovell, you really do a soul searching. And it turns out to be, at least the way I look at it, a high point. Even though it's towards the end of your TV career, it begins the situation where you write one of the great books with Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In. You end up, as I say in the introduction, you end up putting in literally words in the President of the United States' mouth. You know, you give some of the great comic
President Obama, can we be specific?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I don't want to get you in trouble. President Obama. And you really begin to find a new voice and a new role. And a new purpose.
Yeah, no, and it is, you know, this low point professionally becomes this high point personally. When you take ownership of your past and you say, I can speak out now about how hard it was and how it didn't need to be that hard. And it's not out of bitterness or anger because I had a good career. It's just my observation. And that's key, right? The legal term standing is like, I really had to think about that and like, oh, I do have standing.
Well, but you sort of even hint at it earlier. You said this in towards the very beginning of the book. It is better to focus on the next opportunity rather than ruminate on missed chances and setbacks. If I could pluck anything out of this book and give that advice to my viewers, that would have to be the ultimate advice. Because first of all, it is the absolute sign of what makes any great athlete, is their ability to not think of the last pitch, not think of the last missed putt, not think of the last fumble. It's the best advice of any businessman. And again, you named the profession, that's the best advice. If you can focus on the next opportunity rather than ruminate about the setbacks, because those setbacks, they're coming left and right.
Yeah. I mean, specifically, I was talking about pitching jokes in a room. And, I do think there's a certain personality that if you pitch something and people don't respond and they don't laugh, you beat yourself up and you say, why did I pitch that? That was so stupid. And while you're beating yourself up, everyone's thinking about the next joke. So, I always think it's a volume business. and it's not about a batting average. I mean, to go to, or baseball, or it is about it's a batting average. So if you look at baseball, since you brought up sports, the best hitters, what are they getting? 1 out of 3.
Right.
The best.
So you have to look at it that way. I have to, because it's such a fan favorite. Your Simpsons episode, one fish, two fish, blowfish, bluefish, is a classic. And when my son was watching it before, when he knew you were coming on the show, he went over and he says, what makes it so great, it's the rare time where you feel emotion. And you have a lot of stuff in your book that tells us that emotion, when you can tap into the emotional aspect of that, that's the key to great comedy. It's not just the joke. It's, can you take that and feel it as an emotion, feel it viscerally within?
Well, I learned that at The Simpsons, and that was very much Jim Brooks. That's his take on comedy and always has been, and he is the master at that, where it's, you acknowledge that there's this whole range of human emotions. And look, we know in real life the good times slam right into the bad times.
Slam. I want you to emphasize that, because they don't, it's really slam, because it like hits you upside the head. You can't believe you're on this roll and then whack, just like that.
So, I don't see comedy and tragedy as, or I don't see comedy and drama. I don't quite understand why they're so separate, which is why I love working on shows like Monk and NCIS, which also has a lot of humor in it, because I think you can combine those two.
I think you have to, because even in the darkest of what is it? It's foxhole humor. I mean, even in in the darkest of moments, humor is there. It sits there, right there, waiting for someone like a Nell to pluck it right out of you.
Well, there's that great Herb Gardner line from 1,000 Clowns where he says, if things aren't funny, then they're just what they are, then life becomes a long dental appointment.
Now, when we're in the Get Nell, we went from the Who is Nell to Get Me Nell Scovell. And one of the things that I think...
that was nice. I enjoyed this.
When that period, am I right? Yeah. But one of them was, when you were in that period, there's a line where you say you feel like an optometrist, where when you're in that office going, is it better this way or is it better that way? People, when they read this, will get a sense of what it's truly like to be a writer, how there's almost never you almost never can really reach that point of satisfaction. It's always, is it better? And then it gets to the point when you're in the eye doctor's chair, you can't even tell the difference between the two, but you're still going back and forth.
Yeah, but you still make a choice.
And you still make a choice.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that what you even say? Writing. It's all about what's the choice you're going to make.
Right, and I quote my mentor, Barry Kemp, who said, writing is not an act of creation, it's an act of discovery. And what he meant was, you know, these ideas don't come full blown from your head. You have to work out the details. And that's the discovery, you know, and you start down a path and you hit a dead end and then you run back to the next fork in the road and try something else.
One of the amazing things that I was mind-boggled by, you worked on Newhart. Not only worked on it, you worked on it for 8 years. And I love your line, because it's one of the
No, I didn't work on it for 8 years.
How long did you work on it?
Just the final year.
Oh, just the final year. Oh, but it took 8 years. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It took 8 years to get to that final joke in that episode.
Yes.
That's what it was. I'm sorry.
I know, it was a very long setup.
But in that whole, I'm sorry, it was a long setup for that, and it was a long setup in there. That's what it was. It took 8 years to get to the final joke when he wakes up and realizes it's all a dream.
Yeah.
You were grateful to be a part of that. But what I was amazed at the fact that you're there for a year and you never really met Bob Newhart until you leave the show that day.
You know, one of the reasons I connected with Sheryl Sandberg long before I ever met her was she gave.
Well, let's say who Sheryl is again, even though most people do know,
Yes.
but she is the chief operating officer of Facebook.
Right, and she gave a TED Talk in 2010 called Why We Have So Few Women Leaders. And it's brilliant, and everyone, when you're done watching this, should go watch that. And one of the points she makes is that women need to sit at the table. And this is both metaphorical, the table is where decisions get made, but it's also literal. And I sat up straight when she said those words because I'm a story editor on Newhart, which is the lowest rung, but I am on the writing staff. And even when I had scripts with my names on them, I would choose to sit on the periphery and not at the table during the table read. And I thought it was a choice. And when I watched Sheryl, I realized it was a cultural pressure that had been placed on me.
But then, again, as we go in cycles, you end up on the Murphy Brown show, and finally, you are not the lone woman. And you're able to really involve yourself more in the whole operation. And it really takes on a very different feeling than when you're representing your sex versus being one of the writers.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite years in my entire career was on Murphy Brown. And I think we split, there were 40% women, 60% men, and it was just a delight. You know, Candice Bergen, total pro. So you also had this very strong female presence on the set. And you know, it's hard to think of anyone in comedy who's like that, even today, right? Yeah. I mean, women are such messes on TV, and Mom, or, you know, so often, and I miss that. I'm glad it's coming back.
You then have a chance, now we're beyond Who is Nell, you get a chance to create and be the showrunner of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And to this day, in fact, my son tells me they're about to make a new remake of it as well, and to be the creator of that and the showrunner. But there was a line, and I'm going to find, oh yes, here it is. It was by the executive producer Liz Friedman, who said, running a show is like being beaten to death by your own dream. To me, I can't imagine that, and yet, so get me into that, because you create this show. It is really, it's a hit. And how, but yet you relate it obviously to that feeling.
Well, this goes back to gender a little bit. We know that success and likability are positively correlated for men and negatively correlated for women. So the more successful, the more powerful men become, the more they're liked. The more successful and powerful women become, the less they're liked. So as the creator and showrunner of Sabrina, it was creatively the greatest job I ever had. I agreed with the boss, and that was delightful. But the actual managing of the crew was really hard because I wanted to be liked, and there was a lot of pushback.
Oh, see, that's it. Isn't that where that non-aware bias gender, the wanting to be liked? And in fact, by the way, it has changed now. There's no doubt about it. It is maybe not so much in Hollywood because it's been so ingrained, but in the rest of the world, men and women are really, we're seeing a lot more parity. But yet, you know something? And I can relate to this because I never really cared that much if I was liked. Isn't that very funny?
Oh, that is funny.
I want to be loved and liked. Don't get me wrong. Every human being wants to do and feel that way, but it never bothered me. But yet when I was reading, I'm saying, and I know even from the younger generation that are men, they really care, and I go, why do you care? And you know, but I just say, why do you care? I mean, as long as no one's killing you, don't bother with it. But it is, you know, hearing that from you made it just so real to me that I felt the opposite. And in a weird way, it's sometimes the flip side of the coin that it lets you really see the other side.
And when I directed 2 movies, and that really came into play. And, you know, the first movie I had an amazingly supportive producer, and that went very smoothly. And then the second movie I did not, and it was such a struggle.
And in fact, you even said getting the second, your agent said the second one's the tough one, not the first one,
well,
right?
First they tell you the first one's a hard one to get, and then you get that, and then they tell you, no, the second one. For me, it turned out the third one was the hard one to get. I'm still waiting.
Well, let's go back then to the last stage. We said the 5th stage.
Yeah.
And this is one where you bring in Irv Brecker, a great writer, and he's in his 90s, I guess, at this time, maybe even in his mid-90s at the time that you're relating the story, I think. And he still is looking for that one last shot. And I believe I can't remember all the things
he's like 93 when he says this.
But he's written some of the great.
He wrote 2 Marx Brothers movies,
yes.
and the only writer to get sole credit for Marx Brothers movie. He did At the Circus, which is brilliant, and Go West. And he punched up The Wizard of Oz. He wrote this script to Bye Bye Birdie, Meet Me in St. Louis.
I mean, credits that it can't be denied, and yet still craving one more shot. And
so funny still, like I would go visit him on Sundays, you know, the Wilshire Corridor, where they don't call it a cab, they call an ambulance. And we would just trade. He would tell me great jokes. I'm heartbroken that I didn't tape him more because he had impeccable timing.
You say something that I want everyone to be very well aware of. The only paradigm for success is to keep looking for a paradigm for success.
Do you agree?
I agree, and that's why I'm mentioning it, because I want it to be hit home to everyone, because you have to keep the quest going. If you don't keep the quest going, you will never find that little pot of gold, or it doesn't even have to be a pot of gold. You'll never get that satisfaction that you must have to feel that you found the paradigm. And success is a very vague word. It's, you know, great family means success. Great career but not money means success. Great money with, well, I don't know how much success that really means, but the point is you've got to be searching all the time.
Right, and now since we have this theme of sports running through, there's another quote I love from Bill Tilden, who was a tennis player, who says, never change a winning game, always change a losing game. And that was sort of how I built my career, which is I'll try this, I'll try that. You know, I was a challenge junkie, just sort of jumping into whatever opportunity presented itself and seeing if that worked.
I really think that is the advice that everyone needs to hear. And I thank you, Nell, for giving it to us today. It's my pleasure, and thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Nell leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few more words from just the funny parts. Combining passion and mission is a clear path to happiness. Nothing is more satisfying than having a positive impact on people's lives. I'm Barry Kibrick. Between your passion and your mission, just keep having positive impacts on the people in your life, and you will already be on that path to happiness. Thank you so much, Nell.
My pleasure.
My pleasure.
To connect with Barry, like him on Facebook and follow him on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, view past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his weekly blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com.